Wake up with the news and information you can trust. Starting your day the right way with the Andy Griffin Show. This is News Radio 890, 92.5 KDXU.
Well, happy Wednesday morning to you. I know it feels like a Tuesday to some of us, but because most of us had Monday off. But yeah, it is hump day, sort of. And I'm Andy. Thanks for tuning in to KDXU. It's 9:09. Right before I do anything else, I want to mention one of my listeners. His dad is turning, 97 today. So happy birthday to Oscar Judd, 97 years young. You know, my dad always listens to this show, Stockton, and he is 89 going on 90. And one time we actually told my dad, hey, why don't you maybe go look up some of your friends or go hang out with people your own age? He goes, there is nobody my age. They're all dead. Well, Oscar here is actually older, 8 years older than my dad. So 7.5 years older. That's kind of cool. So, Stockton's having a birthday, by the way, this weekend, too, right? Friday, Saturday, somewhere in there? Oh, your microphone's not working, so. It's my bad, I think. This button wasn't pushed. You there?
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, my birthday's coming up on Sunday.
We had some idiot board op use the board over the weekend and pushed all the buttons. Not an idiot. It was you, and you did a great job.
Tee-hee-hee. But yeah, my grandpa's actually nearing that age too.
Yeah, in his 80s?
No, sorry. I was talking about Oscar.
Oh, Oscar, 97.
Yeah.
So he's in his 90s?
Yeah, he's in his 90s.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. He actually lives here in St. George now, and both my grandma and grandpa are still alive and kicking. They're actually doing relatively okay. I mean, their bodies obviously can't keep up with them anymore.
Right.
And just a simple trip is just the bane of their existence.
Yeah.
My poor grandma got a black eye from just a light fall. So it's just, I don't know. But no, congratulations to Oscar for making it this far.
Last year we went to Alaska and we took my dad. He was 88 at the time, and it was pretty hard on him. It was to go because we had to fly to Seattle and then take the cruise ship up to Alaska and back and then fly home, and there was a lot of walking.
Right.
And when you're 89, a lot of walking is a bad thing, especially you got a bum knee. And but he did good. He did a great job, and I'm hoping we can take him on another trip here soon. He's 90. We actually had joked that he flew in a hot air balloon on his 80th birthday, and we're like, hey, how about if you go skydiving
for your 90th
birthday, like George Bush did? But he said, I'm not interested in jumping out of a perfectly good airplane.
Yeah.
So I don't blame him. Dr. Blodgett is on the show here momentarily. In fact, he just showed up, and we'll be coming in. We'll let him catch his breath for a minute. While we wait for him, I do want to right now give away a $20 gift card to Benja's Thai Garden. Stockton's going to answer the phone, and we'll take caller number 3. Again, $20 at Benja's Thai Garden. The coupon is, it's a free dinner. That's pretty cool. Caller number 3, 673-5890, 673-5890, $20 at Benja's, 673-5890. Again, Stockton will answer the phone, and we'll give away some free food. And Dr. Blodgett is here. Have you had long enough to get your breather working? You good? You're good to go? I think we got to get you a microphone. That's what we got to do. There we go. There he is. Dr. Blodgett, how are you?
I'm doing good, thanks. Glad to be here.
Appreciate you coming here. We were just talking about, one of the listeners, his dad is having a birthday. Oscar Judd is 97 years old today.
Wow.
That's pretty cool.
Wonderful, isn't it?
Public health official ought to be pretty happy when there's guys that are 90, and my dad's 89. He listens every day, and so helping to drive up that, I guess, life expectancy a little bit in our area.
So. Well, and it's not just being old; it's being old and healthy, right? That we're after, and so that's the balance here. If you're not,
for sure.
I mean, we want to make sure the health curve is good throughout life, longer, healthier life. So,
I wanted to talk today, and if you're okay with this, talk a little bit about the leading causes of death in Utah. And heart disease is number one in the world and in the country and in the state. And it's not close, right? That's way more.
Well, sometimes cancer gets closer, and we've actually seen heart disease come down a little bit, but it's still 2 out of 3 men will have heart disease in their life, and about 50% of women. So, when there's it is the heavyweight champion of
no pun intended, heavyweight
of the diseases, and it's kind of shocking how. I mean, we talk a lot about risk perception here, and so we get excited about diseases that kill 1 in 10,000 people, but here we have something that kills 2/3 of the people, right? And we just don't even pay attention to it. So
that's crazy. So heart disease would entail, so we're talking about plaque on the arteries and heart attacks. What else fits into the heart disease category?
Even including hypertension.
Okay.
And congestive heart failure, all of those kinds of, valve diseases, all of that kind of range.
And this is technically a disease we know how to not get, right?
Yeah.
All you have to do is do the things we always talk about.
There are lots of ways to improve your chances of not getting heart disease. It unfortunately goes back to those boring
Here we go.
That we always talk about, right? So the broken record is still here: eating your fruits and vegetables, exercising 30 minutes a day, not smoking, maintaining a healthy weight.
What is the genetic factor in heart disease, though? Isn't that a pretty big one too? I mean, if your dad or your granddad had heart disease, there's a pretty good chance you're going to.
Yeah, most diseases have some sort of genetic component to it, so it's probably about 30%. But you can mitigate that genetic impact by having, offsetting it with all those other things we're talking about. So, I mean, it doesn't remove it entirely, but it makes it less likely to hit you at a younger age or something like that.
So, we always hear about, I mean, you don't hear about the 75-year-old obese guy that has a heart attack too often, but you hear about the 55-year-old fitness buff who was running a trail up above St. George, and he has a heart attack and dies. How does that happen? Why does that happen? Is that a genetic thing? Because this is a guy that ate vegetables, he exercised, he was in good shape.
Sometimes, but sometimes it's something else.
Okay.
So there's actually, if you go on, there's this website of hundreds of people that run marathons regularly that have died of heart attacks.
Yeah.
And so we talk about that J-shaped curve in which there's benefit, and then so you for the first half hour there's a lot of benefit, and then the next half hour there's some benefit, and then it drops off, and there's no benefit. In fact, it's actually counterproductive, right? You do more. There's more oxidative damage, and you cause.
And the St. George Marathon's coming up, and we're not trying to diss on the marathon or the Ironman or any of that.
Don't mistake any of that, but you have to understand there is a limit to the beneficial effects of exercise or anything. Everything. The body's all about homeostasis. It has a zone where it works just right, and then outside of that zone, too little, too much, causes trouble for the body.
Why then do you think we revere? I mean, you hear it over. Oh, he pushed his body beyond its limits to set this record, or to run this marathon, or to do this. Why do we revere that so much when it's actually not very good for you?
Well, we tend to admire people that can do something that we can't, but we forget that sometimes that's at real risk for them. Most of the orthopedic surgeons really like, Ironman and stuff like that, because that means future work for them. So I shouldn't say it that way, but
orthopedic is the one that deals with it.
It's counterintuitive because you think it's healthy, but there is this. Everything has a zone that's just right, and outside that zone, above and below, can be a hard time. So you hear about the 55-year-old guy out running. He probably
maybe pushed himself. Yeah,
he could have. That there's all those possibilities. So.
Sure. By the way, Kim C won our Benji's tie, so free dinner for Kim. Congratulations. We're talking about leading causes of death in the state of Utah. Heart disease, number 1. Cancer, number 2. We know a lot about that. Number 3 is listed as accidents. Now, that covers a lot. I mean, we're talking about accidents in the home. We're talking about car accidents. We're talking about, I guess, the accidental discharge of a firearm does not count, or is that also part of it?
No, that's a different category.
Okay. Yeah. So, I remember hearing someone came on the show. This was 6 months ago, and said, the number one accident in the home are falls. People tripping and falling and hitting something.
It's interesting. You're far more likely to die from falls than a whole lot of things that we get really excited about.
Is that more age related, or is that young people are dying from falls in the home too?
It's more age related for sure, but it can happen at any age. But most of the time, you hear about it in the elderly, and we try and. So, living where we live, we have programs geared towards the elderly, and one of those things that we talk about is falls. And so just even having a throw rug in your house.
I was actually thinking about that, because in my house I have a couple of them, and every once in a while they get kind of wrinkled or whatever, and the floor is not what you thought it was, and then you go down.
It's shocking how many times people trip on those throw rugs, and so we've talked about this. Once you break a hip, so you're doing fine, you're living independently, and then you fall, you break a hip. Yeah. Number one, the mortality for that is really high within the first 2 years after breaking a hip. But two, getting that mobility back and being independent again is unlikely. So you try and emphasize, sometimes it looks good, but sometimes it's not what you want. It's a death trap. So.
Well, and if you go in the hospital, I was reading something that, from one of the studies that said going to the hospital increases your chances of contracting some rather nasty, things just by being in the hospital. Yeah. And of course, they do everything they can to try to mitigate that, but it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you think about it, you're concentrating all of that in one place. And so as good as the efforts are to try and keep the hospital safe, we call them in our world hospital-acquired infections, diseases that, some of them there isn't an antibiotic that will treat them. And fortunately, they're not very, very easily spread, or, they tend to only... we call them opportunistic. They show up in people that are really immune compromised and in a bad way. But it kind of bodes ill for when you have diseases and there's mechanisms out there to evade every known antibiotic we have.
Yeah,
that's scary. Something we track very closely.
You and I were both out of town last month, and so Dave Heaton was gracious enough to come in and talk with Melody on this program. But I don't know if you knew this. Right before I went out of town, I made another trip back to the hospital.
Oh, no.
Yeah. No. I have this numb leg on my left side, and cellulitis came back, which then led to my old friend's sepsis, which is quite deadly. And one of the things that I discovered with my now 4 trips to the hospital with sepsis is exactly what you're talking about with the antibiotics. We actually, the most serious time, and I was really sick, and not as much this past one, but they actually had to try, I think it was 4 different antibiotics before the first 3 just weren't doing it. It wasn't going away. And they finally found the 4th one, and they're like, okay, this one is working. We're going to put you on this one.
Yeah. Well, and you look, they actually study the time from when the antibiotic is introduced until it begins to... some bug starts to show resistance to it, and that time is shortening, right? Penicillin was like 40 years or something.
It was magical at first,
Now they introduce a new medication or a new antibiotic, and sometimes it's 6 months. Within 6 months, there's resistant bugs out there.
Wow.
So it's an interesting and quite frankly, scary side of medicine that I think
the thing that always isn't working is definitely scary.
Well, modern medicine really is based on antibiotics, right? It changed the whole landscape of everything, and so it's part of why, dare I bring it up, why vaccination is so critical, because...
Oh, we just got 4 phone calls because you said the word vaccination. No, I'm just kidding.
But you end up preventing those diseases and the antibiotic use that goes along with that, and everything, so you don't have those increased infections and things that you have to treat. It's a superior way to keep the bug away. makes a difference. So,
by the way, I didn't know sepsis came in different forms. Apparently, this last time I had streptococcus in my system, in my blood. And I don't know. I think that's less serious than the other stuff I had last time, but still very, very deadly and serious. And so we had signed up for this river cruise in Europe for 6 months. We were planning this thing, and 3 days before we're to go, I'm in the hospital, and the doctor says, "Well, you need 2 weeks of IVs."
Oh no!
And we were like, here's the thing. On Monday, we just spent a lot of money, and I'm not going to say how much, but a lot of money so we could go to Europe, and we'd really like to go. I don't want to die, but we'd really like to go. So we had, and this was on Pioneer Day, and I wish I could remember the doctor's name. I'm terrible with names, but this doctor went above and beyond. He got on the phone. He got a hold of an infectious disease guy on Pioneer Day, and they were able to put together a strategy to help me get over the sepsis while I was still and still let me get to Europe. In fact, it was a heavy regimen of amoxicillin.
Yeah,
that got me through it. But yeah, they went above and beyond on Pioneer
That's
Day.
wonderful. That's great to hear, and I'm glad you had a good trip.
Doctors sometimes get a bad rap, but I'll tell you what, these guys were, they went above and beyond. I was really impressed.
Yeah, you think about the variables they deal with every day. They do magnificent work for sure.
All right, leading causes of death in the state of Utah. We're talking a little bit about now. Alzheimer's comes in number 4.
Yeah.
Now we've talked about this a little bit in the past, but maybe if we could go over it again. Alzheimer's, the disease, doesn't actually kill you itself, does it? It's the effects of Alzheimer's. I know that's a weird way to say it, but
somewhat. So we know that for example, if you reach the age of 70, a 70-year-old that has Alzheimer's versus a 70-year-old that doesn't have Alzheimer's, is twice as likely to die from any cause of death.
Okay.
And so, do you call that a direct impact of the disease, or do you call that, what does that mean? But they'll talk about deaths due to Alzheimer's when they have Alzheimer's. But so the reality is, it might not be that exact disease that killed you, but it makes it more likely that other diseases will. So the numbers are pretty stark. Up until about the age of 65, most people are unlikely to end up with a dementia or Alzheimer's. It's about 1 in 18, something like that, by the time you hit 65. Once you hit 65, your lifetime risk of Alzheimer's becomes 1 in 10, but that magnifies as you get older. So by the time, if you're 90, your risk is 1 in 4. 1 in 4 90-year-olds will have Alzheimer's. So it's definitely a disease of aging, and a disease. There's a genetic component in there for sure.
Okay.
Kind of in that 30% range, just like we talked about with heart disease. But then it really seems like good health habits and good mental health habits younger in life really
What would be a good mental health habit?
So challenging yourself mentally, right?
So actually a crossword puzzle or a memorizing things.
Perhaps the studies, sometimes don't bear that, but things that really challenge you, like learning a language, staying active.
But the old adage, an old dog can't learn new tricks, right?
But it's not true.
Not true.
It really is not true. And I think it really helps to take the opposite approach, which is I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna stay engaged. Social engagement, having a group of friends and being out and not staying isolated. But one that's rising to the top right now in the studies is hearing loss.
Yeah.
And visual loss.
And that is actually tied to social engagement, because if you can't hear, it's hard to engage.
Yeah. So they're not exactly sure the mechanism behind that, but it's clear that if you are missing the world because you don't have good hearing, that contributes to dementia, particularly Alzheimer's. So something like 2/3 to 3/4 of all dementia patients are Alzheimer's patients, but there are other forms of dementia, multi-infarct or stroke-based dementias, Lewy body dementias. There's a list of what can cause dementias, but in particular, Alzheimer's, I think, is scary to all of us.
For sure. Speaking of hearing loss, a couple of things about that. So I went yesterday to a drive-through at it was Chick-fil-A, and I love their little Chick-fil-A sauce. I don't know who doesn't. I mean, it's incredible. So I go through the drive-through. The lady hands me my bag of food, and I said, "Hey, does this have your barbecue sauce in it? That whatever the sauce is?" And I thought she said, "Yeah, you're good," or something like that. But apparently, she said something like, "Let me get that for you." So when she said, "Yeah, you're good," I said, "Okay, thanks," and drove off. Got here back to the station at lunchtime, there's no sauce. And I realized, because of my years of wearing headphones and maybe a few years of rocking out too, my hearing's not as good as it used to be. And I know that's a stupid little example, but that is an example.
No, and we all miss things, you know, and but I look now, and young people, they always have ear pods in their ears.
Oh, yeah. And those are...
I hope they're doing a better job of being aware of what that can do to them, you know.
Yeah.
But I suspect that's not the case, so...
All right, the rest of the list now. This was a 2022 list. COVID-19 was 5th, stroke 6th. 7th is chronic lower respiratory disease. Can you explain what that means?
Yes. So these are... COPD is the classic that we always talk about, so smoking-related kinds of things, but can be related to asthma, you know, things that deal with the lungs and chronic disease of the lungs. You know, and COPD, nasty way to die.
That's a bad one. You basically suffocate to death?
Right, and so you gradually lose more and more of your capacity to breathe and exchange air across the alveoli of your lungs, and I don't know if you remember this in school, but they used to bring a straw to school and say, "Okay, this is what it's like to have COPD. Take the straw and try and run around the room and breathe through the straw." And that's, you know, slowly that capacity to take in enough breath just goes away, and it's, you know, so you end up on oxygen, and gradually that isn't even enough. So it's not a, you know, smoking fortunately has decreased a lot.
Unless you go to Europe, where I was, for whatever reason, they still love smoking over there.
For some reason, in some of the places, worldwide, there's still 60% of Chinese men smoke right now.
Unbelievable.
But anyway, fortunately here in America, but still 10%.
Wow.
20%.
That's a big hunk.
10%
we don't see that in St. George.
Yeah, well, 10% here and 20% nationwide. I mean, that's still a big number, right? Yeah. And we're starting to see vape overcome or overtake that, meaning we'll see more. The younger generation, there'll be more vapors than smokers.
And as it turns out, that's maybe even worse for you.
Yeah, well, it's certainly not an awesome alternative. I think if somebody came to me and said, "Would you rather have me vape or smoke because I'm addicted to nicotine and I need to figure out how to get off it," I'd say switch over to vape. But that doesn't mean you should start either one, right? Because they're not great for you. And so there's kind of a controversy in the medical literature about, can you use vaping as a cessation strategy, you know, as something to transition off. And there are a lot of docs that are doing that.
Will that work? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, it's substituting one addiction for another, but...
Yeah, that's not a good thing. All right, we got to get a weather break in. Talking with Dr. Blodgett today. Real quick asthma story. My wife has pet dander-induced asthma. And when she has an asthma attack, she described it exactly like you described it. She said, "Okay, get a little straw and walk around, go for a walk, climb some stairs, whatever, and try to breathe only through that straw. That she says that's exactly what it feels like.
Yeah.
That sounds terrible.
And it's terrifying, right?
All right, we'll be right back.
Wake up with the news and information you can trust. This is the Andy Griffin Show on News Radio 890, 92.5 KDXU, Southern Utah's News Talk leader.
We're lucky enough to have Dr. David Blodgett with us today. Dr. Blodgett, former chief resident at Johns Hopkins. I haven't brought that up for a while, but I thought I'd throw that in there. And
That's right. Thank you.
Elected to come home and take care of the folks here in Southern Utah. We really appreciate that, Dr. Blodgett. I know there are other things you could be pursuing that probably are a lot more lucrative. But I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder if I just didn't want to make money in life.
A vow of poverty, right? Well, I don't know about poverty, but
no.
We're talking about leading causes of death. Number 3 was accidents. I know you had a couple of other points you wanted to make about accidents.
Well, accidents fluctuates in that kind of 2, 3, 4 range depending on the time, but it's been slowly creeping up over time relative to the others. And part of what I thought we ought to talk about is one of the tragedies of accidents is it's the number one cause of death in those 20 and younger. So we end up kind of glossing over saying, wow, it's the third or fourth cause of death, but these are young people, right? And they struck down in the prime of life. And
so what would they be then for young people? We're talking about car accidents? Are we talking about drug overdose? Does that count as an accident?
No,
okay.
That would be drug abuse. There's a category for drugs there too. But so car accidents, falling off of things, hiking accidents, you hear about those. Yeah. Those kinds of accidental death kinds of things. And it includes older people too, but it's still...
And it's number 1 under 20. Number one leading cause of death.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So you, as we look at things that take years of potential life loss, which is a different metric, right? Mm-hmm. Then accidents actually get up there pretty high. Yeah. It's not as high as HIV, interestingly.
Really?
But accidents are right up there. So a good chunk of those, 2/3, are alcohol related or drug or something related. So that's another way that drugs impact the system. So
DUI type thing.
Yeah. So you realize, cars have gotten safer over the years, and but it can't overcome the pure
we're driving faster
we're
too.
Doing it wrong kind of stuff, And so I don't know, gosh, all winter long, I drive that road a lot, and I'm always surprised at how many times you'll see some guy, you're going 45 or 50 because it's really snowy, and some guy goes blazing by at 90, 95, and then you see him rolled over on the side of the road, a couple miles down the road, and I there's all these. I think we know how to be safer, but sometimes
don't do it.
There is also this phenomenon that they talk about in the medical literature, and because we don't have a lot of danger in our lives, sometimes we go and seek danger, right? There's that kind of personality that does that, So you see these guys.
The little footnote: see AJ/Griffin. My son does that. Yeah, thrill seeker.
Well, you take a guy that works on an oil rig, right, out in the Gulf of Mexico. He doesn't do that, right? His job's dangerous enough that he gets enough of a thrill there. But you see these guys on YouTube that are jumping in between buildings, and then they have the famous, this is their last jump, and then you think
see it a lot,
you could call that, right? But there's a lot of the thrill-seeking element that comes into that age range. I think largely we've done a pretty good job of getting rid of a lot of the risk, and so there's some need for risk in maybe in all of us, but for sure in some of us that they go seeking that. So it's a spectrum, but the highest, most of those accidents, a good chunk of them are automobile related accidents. And
wow. All right, on the list, number 8 is diabetes. We've talked a lot about diabetes. A lot of people are pre-diabetic. You can reverse the onset of diabetes if you're pre-diabetic by fixing your diet, by being a little, more conscious of what you eat and how much you exercise. And
if you lose 5 to 7% of your body weight, you can prevent 70% of those that would have progressed to diabetes will not progress to diabetes. So it's not that you have to lose weight to get down to a perfect 25 BMI. It's that just pulling some off the top really seems to have a big benefit, And so we've made a big effort around diabetes at the health department, trying to raise awareness, trying to make sure the numbers are pretty stark. 10% of the overall population has diabetes. It's another one where it gets higher percentages as you get older. 20. Their projections are 25% of those over 65 will be either pre-diabetic or diabetic by shortly. So we really want to help people pay attention to that. There's pre-screenings you can take that'll help you identify if you're at higher risk. At times during the year, we'll run free A1C events where we'll give some A1Cs away just to, you can see, or they're really cheap. They're $30 at the health department, 35 maybe. And you can come in and get an A1C, but people won't do it. They say, I don't want to know.
I don't want to know.
And that's unfortunate because this is one area where you can make a big, big, big impact.
Well, I was going to say, if you go back to accidents as a public health official, there's got to be a level of frustration for you because there's not a whole lot you can do except maybe awareness of stopping accidents, but you can do a lot with something like diabetes.
Yeah. Well, we sure try, but all of it still boils down to individual behavior, right? We can't be the one driving the car for you. You try and implement as a society. You try and say, well, look, we're gonna really penalize people if they drink and drive, right? And that hopefully helps cut down on that. But still, in the end, there's the driver behind the wheel factor and. Or the person that we all need to be engaged in our own health and be excited about what we can do to live a longer, healthier life.
I got a text here, and I'm gonna maybe you know what he's talking about. What about ZYN pouches? What are the dangers of using them? They seem to be the new trend. Is that weight loss things, or is this something different?
Yeah, no, it's a tobacco product.
Oh, tobacco.
So
okay.
You stick them in your lip like a chew or something.
Are they any
so all of this is nicotine, right? And nicotine in and of itself has problems. It narrows blood vessels, causes hard on your heart and stuff like that. Smoking has and marijuana smoke, quite frankly, has the unique difficulty of all of the products of combustion that make it even worse. But even we seem to want to have our cake and eat it too. We want to be able to, have something that's addictive and gives us a little bit of a push. So nicotine, caffeine, all of it gives you a little bit of an energy push. Mm-hmm. The problem is over time, and we've talked about that, you end up
needing more.
It's called tachyphylaxis in the medical world, where
I love that word.
Where that impact of the drug just lessens over time, and so instead of getting any lift out of it, all you're doing is trying to get back to where you would have been had you never consumed that substance. And so nicotine is actually worse that way because it has a really short half-life, and so you're always left wanting more. And so you end up with the nicotine problem, which in and of itself is problematic. That's part of the whole vaping spectrum and everything else. You do cut out the combustion product part of that equation. So if somebody's trying to quit smoking, but the real question is, why would you want to sign up for a habit that that'll cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime and negatively impact your health and be an addictive thing where you really crave it anytime you don't have it. And I guess the advice is just stay away from anything nicotine related.
All right, 2 items left on our leading causes of death in the state of Utah. We'll tell you what those are and talk about them with Dr. Blodgett right after this. Also, the flu shootout is coming up. We'll talk about that when we come back.
All the latest news, weather, traffic, and sports, just like you like them. You're waking up with the Andy Griffin Show on News Radio 890, 92.5 KDXU, Southern Utah's news talk leader.
Welcome back. Our monthly visit from the doctor. Yes, he does house calls. Well, he does studio calls. Anyway, Dr. Blodgett is here. If you have a question for him, give us a call, 673-5890, or you can text me at 435-467-5842. Before we get into the last 2 leading causes of death in Utah, let's talk about the shootout. You got the flu shootout coming up on the 24th, was it?
24th, Tuesday, 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. at our usual site there at the Red Cliffs Mall parking lot on the far east side there.
Okay, and is it the stay in your car thing and you'll shoot them? Or
stay in the car and we'll shoot you up. So anybody 18 and older is welcome.
Okay.
We don't take kids there because kids are really hard.
When you got car seats.
When they're in car seats and they're kicking you. So they're more than welcome to come to our clinics or anything like that. But 18 and plus, wear a shirt that is easy to roll up and get to, and
don't wear a skin tight, heavy wool, whatever. Yeah, that'd be bad.
So free with most insurances. If we don't take the insurance, it's $25. We'll give you a super bill. You can send to your insurance if you have one. And
I believe we're going to have them come shoot us here on the air, right?
That's right. Yeah. The annual.
We're going to get stabbed right on the air.
On air.
I have to tell you, your nurses are fantastic, the ones you brought, and you don't. It's one of those shots where you go, okay, are you going to do it any time now? And they're like, I already did it.
Yeah,
it's over.
We used little teeny tiny needles.
Yeah, they're not.
They're and when you give thousands of shots like our nurses do, they get really really good at them. So that's we'll look forward to that.
I had
Dave come in and
it'll be good. I had 2 sons that had differing opinions about shots. My middle son Dallas, he fell in a cactus once and didn't even cry. When he was like 5. And then I have my other son Bryce, who he would look at a needle and start crying before you ever even 10 feet away. He's like, so. They were kind of, and neither one was the better son. It's just the way it worked out.
Yeah,
kind of funny.
Everybody's different. That's awesome.
All right, the last 2 things on the leading causes of death: suicide, number 9; nutritional deficiencies, number 10. Let's start with 10. The nutritional deficiencies. That it sounds like we're letting people starve to death. Does that happen, or is it?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's that.
No, not quite.
They're just not making good food choices, right?
Okay.
So let me give you an example. I once had she was a college professor.
Okay.
Who
supposed to be really smart.
Decided to go on a Diet Coke diet.
A Diet Coke diet.
45 days. She did nothing but drink Diet Coke.
No food?
No food, and died. And so
she died?
Yes, she did. She passed away. So
you were not endorsing the Diet Coke diet?
No, I am not endorsing the Diet Coke diet. I think so. It's ironic that in a society with the good, safe, reasonably reliable, cheap system like we have to get food, that we have people that either deliberately or maybe not deliberately die from just nutritional imbalance, basically.
I had a month left on my mission. This was a long time ago. I wanted to lose weight before I got home because I wanted to look good for the ladies and stuff like that. I went on a possum and tomato soup diet. And for 30 days, I ate nothing but possum and tomato soup. I did not die, but hearing your Diet Coke story, I lost 20 pounds in 30 days.
Yeah.
But hearing your Diet Coke story, I'm thinking maybe I was closer to death than I realized, because that...
Yeah. maybe not. There's some nutrition in there, but
yeah,
I don't mean to belittle the fact that there are people in our society that just don't have access to food insecurity, is what we call it, and so they say that 25%, and I don't know, that number seems high to me, but it could be real, of kids in school, the only meal they get on an average day is school lunch.
The school meal, that's it.
And and so paying attention, and it's something as a society we grapple with, is how do you make sure everybody has access to adequate food and things like that. So I didn't mean to belittle that, but there's a little bit of all of that. Most of the time, that statistic, though, has something to do with an imbalance of some sort where people aren't. It's shocking how little people can live on, but how little food people can live on. But when you take it to the extremes that people sometimes tend to do.
I still can't believe your professor died on a Diet Coke diet. Holy cow.
Hard to believe.
That's scary. All right, let's talk about number 9. This is 9th leading cause of death in the state of Utah. September is 2 things. It's Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. That's not the cause here. The other one is September is Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month. And that is number 9 in the state of Utah. Now, we get into it as a public health official, we get into this gray area because that is more of a mental health thing. So you would go over to the behavioral health area, but obviously it made the top 10 list of people dying in our state, so it's got to be on your radar a little bit.
Yeah, it does. I think sometimes we have some misconceptions about suicide.
Yeah.
One of the big misconceptions is, the death in a high school student that does that, catches everybody's attention, and there's everybody rallies around and talks about it, and sometimes you get some copycats that you worry about. I mean, there's just some real concern there, and that captures all the attention. But for every one of those, there's 2 or 3, 4 elderly people that commit suicide, and that's actually where the bulk of suicide deaths come from.
And
people that just have decided it's just not worth the fight anymore, and that's tragic. Anybody deciding to give up on life is that's hard, and so I think as a society we've recognized that we need to reach out and put our best efforts towards trying to minimize the effects of mental health illnesses, and specifically targeting what can we do better with suicide. But
I think people don't. You mentioned it. They get the headlines when a high school quarterback kills himself or something like that, and rightfully so. It deserves a lot of attention. But I become more aware, and this has kind of been my little pet charity is Reach for Hope and the suicide prevention here in southern Utah. But I don't think people understand it's happening, and it's happening a lot to males over the age of, really over the age of 40. But then, like you said, the elderly too, where I think if you get diagnosed with a disease, hey, you've got Parkinson's, in a few years it's going to get really bad. That person might go, well, you know what, maybe
it's not worth it.
I don't want to get Parkinson's. Maybe I'll just take care of it now. So sad.
We have an epidemic in this country of what they're calling deaths of despair. So you combine suicides, alcohol, drug deaths together, and you're in that top 5 kind of range for certain groups. Mostly the ones dying of deaths of despair now are white males above the age of 40. And, we don't talk about it because they're not in a disadvantaged group or whatever you want to call it from the media standpoint. But it's alarming to think that, we're losing. Those are productive years. Those are
guys
our people
age
that need
too.
to be leading their families. They're people that need to be engaged and moving forward in life, and we're losing far too many of them. So.
I know there's not a magic bullet to fix it. Is there? What are we doing to try to slow that down a little?
Yeah. Well,
and I ask you this giant question with 1 minute left, by the way.
Yeah. I think we need to remind people of what really matters in life, right? I mean, I think we glorify the things that don't matter sometimes, and we forget the things that do matter. And what does matter is productivity and being contributing and meeting the challenges of life head on, and having that hope that we're making a difference in other people's lives. You know, how many people know you and are reliant on you for that pickup or that little bit of help, or, you know, all of us have this network around us. And I think focusing on the connectedness of being human and what it means to fight the good fight, I think is something we need to remind ourselves of. So,
wise words from Dr. Blodgett every month, first Wednesday of every month. Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate talking to you.
Great to be here. Thank you, Andy.
Talk to everybody tomorrow.